Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure, and I cover a wide array of topics. I've got a great guest coming on in a few minutes. Before I do, I want to tell you about my weekly newsletter, which comes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, you'll find the mundane motions of the planets for the weeks to come, as well as individual signs for each of your individual signs going down the list. And I encourage you to always read your sun sign as well as your rising sign. Put the two together, you'll get a far more accurate reading of what's to come in the week ahead. So the other day I was poking around the web and I got an interesting email from someone who works with Planetary Vibrational Medicine. His name is MichelAngelo. He's an opera singer, a classical composer, a pianist, an astrologer, healer, diviner, writer. And he's a long-time established astrological practice which offers a unique synergy of astrology, divination, and transformative planetary vibrational bodywork, which sounds like quite a mouthful. But planetary vibrational medicine represents a quantum leap forward in the astrological art. It is a powerful synthesis of astrological consultation with oneiromancy, I'm not sure I got that right, dream interpretation, both astrological and with tarot, divination, vocal sound healing, and transformative vibrational healing. A fusion of Western medical astrology and other astrological interpretation, Oriental medical theory, and practice and planetary frequency, which sounds like quite a mouthful, and it is. My guest today is MichelAngelo. Welcome to the show today, MichelAngelo, and help us steer us into the realm of which you're working in.
Sure. Well, Chris, I wanted to thank you for having me on your show at such short notice, and it's
great to have
you. Great pleasure to meet you, albeit at an electronic remove on this Thursday afternoon in New York. Well, let's see. Maybe I should just give you a little bit of history. As you noted in the bio, I am originally an opera singer, and I had the great good fortune to meet another wonderful opera singer 25 years ago, who at the time that we met was very much on a healing path. I was sort of still in the process of discovering myself. But in the course of our mutual growth together, she became quite fascinated with healing applications of sound and pursued a great deal of inquiry into that realm of her own volition. And then she came in contact with a community that's based in northern New Mexico called Acutonics. And I should preface this by saying that there are many different sound healing communities out there at this point here in North America and arguably worldwide as well. But the thing that distinguishes Acutonics is that the visionary creator of that system, Donna Carey, was originally an acupuncturist. So she embarked upon a consideration of sound healing from an Oriental medicine perspective and essentially devised a system which synergizes use of what I would call the poetic and energetic landscape of the points and meridians of Oriental medicine with considerations that we would consider to be traditionally of a Western medical astrological bent. Mm-hmm. So you have a system that fundamentally combines those two things. And the intersection, of course, is in the nature of the tones that are used. Because let's say, hypothetically, you decide you're very fascinated with tuning forks. Well, if you go on to the net and you Google tuning forks, you're going to find a bazillion different kinds, because everybody's got their own idea about the precise frequencies that are used with healing sound, particularly as it relates to tuning forks. The thing that distinguishes this system is that the frequencies that are involved are derived specifically from planetary motion. Mm-hmm. So this is where the two intersect, in that we have this connection, if you will, with archetypal vibration that is specifically cosmological, rather than relating to, our Western chromatic tunings, for example, which we would find on a piano or other, standard instrument. So, go ahead.
So each planet resonates at certain frequencies. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and
Yes.
again, I give you a little background with that. There's a gentleman named Hans Cousteau, no relation to Jacques, a Swiss mathematician and musicologist who, as far as I know, is still alive today. In 1978, he wrote a book called The Cosmic Octave. And in the Cosmic Octave, he devised a very simple equation for converting the average rotational velocity of the planets around the sun into frequency. And he put forth at that point his own system of planetary tuning forks. And these are the frequencies that Acutonics uses, but they've also expanded upon Cousteau's basic repertoire.
I see. So how do they relate? How does the individual frequency of an individual planet relate to the individual or the person? If a person has a difficult aspect in their charts, a square or an opposition, would the tuning forks be there or the resonance of the individual planets involved be used in part of that therapy?
Yeah. I mean, as you sort of touched on in the brief bio that you read, part of what I'm doing here is offering what I would refer to as astrological remediation. And I can't say that I've coined that term. There's a wonderful and extremely academically accomplished astrologer on the West Coast, Andrea Gers, who wrote a book of that title. But astrological remediation is really very much a part of our tradition. It's particularly current in Vedic astrology, where routinely, if you see a Vedic astrologer, they will prescribe a vibrational remedy for you to deal with the particular grahas, the planets that are grabbing you at the time. And they say, oh, you must wear this citrine, it will help you with your Saturn, And so this is very much a part of our tradition. In the West, we've sort of moved into psycho-spiritual counseling in the last 100 years. And admittedly, that may be a blanket statement that some people might disagree with, but arguably that is the main focus of Western astrology. So in bringing these tuning forks to bear, then we're in a sense doing an extension, if you will, of what Vedic astrology has been doing for hundreds of years, which is bringing a certain vibrational frequency to bear so as to reharmonize something that is disharmonious in the chart.
Right. Well, at any point in time, everyone has a square or something going on in their charts, regardless of who they may be. There's going to be some tension at some point in everyone's chart. So you would use the tuning fork to identify that and perhaps use that as a medicine or a therapeutic tool to help soften the effects of that hard transit, perhaps?
Yeah. One thing I want to also make clear at this point is that the interesting thing about this particular system is that you're always using tuning forks in tandem. So you're always using two tuning forks. So what is that? Well, two tuning forks is either an astrological aspect or it's a midpoint, right? So there's a wonderful immediacy about this idea of grabbing hold of these instruments that encode the vibrational essence of a given planet and then bringing it to bear upon the body. Now, the larger question, of course, is then how does one best go about it? And that's where the points and meridians of acupuncture are coming.
I see. So you would use if a person was feeling an aspect in between planets within their own unique personal chart, you would use the tuning forks to apply the proper vibration to the acupressure point. So in other words, place that fork on their body so that it would resonate through their skeleton, right? Is that the idea? Yeah.
Through the skeleton, through the tissue.
Nerve system, yeah, right. Interesting.
And admittedly, you can also work in energetic field. Another interesting thing about this system that Acutonics has put forth is that they have a range of different frequencies. So they have middle frequency forks, they have low frequency forks, they have high frequency forks that can be used above the body. They also have planetary gongs and chimes. So there's a wealth of potential
sound,
that can be brought to bear. But fundamentally, it is about engaging the body. And I would say to you that it is at its core, and in keeping, I think, with the whole idea of remediation, as I've voiced it to you, is that it is an homeopathic system. In
Right.
other words, it presupposes that there's a fundamental disharmony that simply has to be realigned.
I see.
And so, let's say you do have a Mars-Jupiter square that's giving you, a bit of a difficult time. Well, then you can use the Mars and Jupiter forks in tandem to address that disharmony.
I see. Now, when you put those two forks together, do they, being in a square, if they're in a square in a person's chart and you're using them together, do they form a third pattern or third note as a result of the combination of the two?
Yeah, the interval of the Mars-Jupiter is approximately a major third in our Western tunings. So see, that's interesting because you're talking about a disharmonious pattern, but you're harmonizing it with a harmonious interval.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say if they were disharmonious, you would see that you would feel that energy, and then by applying the particular forks for the particular planets, you sort of assuage that problem. You sort of counterbalance. Yeah, interesting. Wow. Huh.
Yeah, and the thing is that as you become a more sophisticated practitioner, you can actually, in effect, create a little tone poem of sound, in that you can start with a fundamentally balancing and harmonizing combination, and then you can move through things that are perhaps more dissonant and then return to a more harmonious
Right. So, but you use tuning forks for this. I've also seen this done with sort of crystal bowls that resonate to a certain sound frequency as well, based on the astrological signs.
Sure. Yeah. Now, I haven't seen those in particular, but I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah, sure they are. So the interesting thing is that when you find that, now, how do you go about sort of determining what the affinity might be, or determining what the ailment might be, or where this weakness might occur in a person's body?
Well, that's where we get into the realm of medical astrology, because we all work with the same symbols in the astrological world. We work with a limited number of planets and signs, and admittedly, as modern astrologers, we bring in other factors, asteroids, hypothetical planets, things like planetary midpoints. But when we examine the person's chart from the standpoint of looking for potential constitutional imbalance, we're essentially looking at the whole body now as planetary landscape. So according to the precepts of medical astrology, everything in the body can be described by some combination of planets or another.
Right.
So let's say, for example, you do see let's use the combination we've been discussing, Mars-Jupiter in a disharmonious relationship. I mean, that combination, Mars and Jupiter by itself, can mean so many different things. But from a medical perspective, Jupiter, in the Western astrological symbolism, refers to the liver, among other things. And Mars, as a fundamentally malefic planet, according to the traditions of Western medical astrology, fundamentally is all about perhaps excess heat or inflammation. So in simple terms, a Jupiter-Mars combination could refer to someone who has a hot liver.
Okay.
And a hot liver is potentially a sign of problems, with that organ. It could be brought about by, excessive amount of alcohol consumption or other types of digestive disharmonies.
Right. And so you would address that. You would see this in a person's chart. You'd see this Jupiter-Mars square, and you'd say, how do we address this? And maybe you wouldn't even see some symptoms. So in many ways, you are being preventative medicine in some ways, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. So you're addressing the problem prior to it occurring. And I think the use of... So you would find there are acupuncture pressure points that align particularly with the individual organs. So you would apply these tuning forks to areas on the acupressure points that apply to those organs. Is that correct?
You could do that, certainly. There are also, how will I put it? There are also very specific meridians that fundamentally address our DNA level of organization, called the 8 extraordinary meridians. And so when you're seeking to sort of realign someone, arguably, as you put it, from a preventative, prophylactic level, you can actually work then with the 8 extraordinary meridians to address that more fundamental level of organization. And interestingly enough, there is an 8 extraordinary meridian pairing that relates to Mars and Jupiter, because then this is where the synergy of the two systems begins to get interesting, because in Oriental medicine there are traditional planetary correspondences with the 5 elements. Not necessarily all Western astrologers would be aware of that.
Right.
The ancient Chinese saw the same 7 traditional planets as people did in the West, but their propensity is to see things from an esoteric perspective in 5s. So the sun and moon to them were not planets; they were the embodiment of the yang and the yin, the Tai Yang,
right? Yeah.
and Tai Yin, the moon, the great yang and the great yin, just as we do. The other 5 planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, were corresponding with the 5 elements. So Mars and Jupiter then would correspond to fire and wood. And this meridian that I'm referring to, the Daimai, has one point is fire and one point is wood. So you could then take that Mars-Jupiter combination and apply it to the relevant 5 element points on that particular meridian, what they call the opening and coupling points, master and coupling points. So that goes yet to another level, because the Daimai refers to conditions of potential emotional toxicity, which might also have to do with the fact that the liver is out of sorts. If someone is excessively angry, their liver is going to become extremely unbalanced.
Okay, interesting.
So in working with this combination, you're not only addressing the planetary disharmony as perceived, the possible imbalance with the organ, but also the underlying emotional substrate that's causing the disharmony.
Mm-hmm. And that you could see, I think that would be fairly easy to see within the astrology chart, because people always come to astrologers, such as myself and yourself, when they are in times of dire need, and they come when they are out of sorts. And so it makes sense that if they come to you out of sorts, you would be able to identify when that would be and perhaps address it. So in many ways, well, I guess there'd be 2 scenarios. There'd be the person who came to you in a preventative measure, then there'd be the person who came to you in a sort of diagnostic measure, trying to get a solution to a problem versus trying to prevent a problem.
Yeah.
And when they approach this process, they have to be cognizant of where they are feeling or where their weak points would be, and then you would then apply you sort of conjure up a sound elixir, I guess, for lack of a better word, or a sound treatment that would either soften or remove that difficult thing. Now, where do you see this coming out? Does it just simply soften the impact of what could be there, or does it actually resolve the problem?
Well, again, I would say to you, given that I perceive this as fundamentally a homeopathic approach.
Right. Okay. So right. Yeah. So then, I think probably the wise way to approach this would be through a preventative measure, or simply out of a desire to sort of realign yourself, reharmonize yourself in a way that's more productive. So you would. If you did have a weakness within the medical system of a person, you would be able to identify that and then sort of apply the acutonics to sort of bolster up their immune system. Is that a good way of approaching?
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, all traditional medicines fundamentally work from the standpoint of maintaining balance and harmony.
Right.
So people don't necessarily go to an acupuncturist once they're aware of the benefits of the symptom, because they're sick, to use the Western terminology.
Right. They go prior to.
They go to maintain an equilibrium, a homeostasis.
Right.
You see, so
they do it. They do it preventatively. That is the basis of acupuncture, is to actually do it preventatively. People, that's the Eastern philosophy, whereas Western philosophy, we wait for things to break and then try to run to repair them, whereas their approach is more about, let's prevent this from happening to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, Western allopathic medicine presupposes a paradigm of illness.
Right.
And I'm sure you probably know, Chris, that traditional Oriental medicine practitioners were not paid if their patients were sick.
That's right.
They were only paid when their patients were well.
That's right.
So this is really, tying in a very profound way into that tradition, but using tools that are arguably more Western medical in orientation. And interesting enough, of course, this harkens back to an ancient philosophical notion here in the West, the whole idea of the music of the spheres, which Pythagoras was really the one who codified that in the 6th century BCE. And it's arguable that the Pythagoreans really did practice a sort of proto-sound healing.
Hmm.
The marvelous thing about it, I feel, is the engagement of the body directly with transformative planetary vibration.
Yeah, it certainly does make sense on a very cerebral level, because so much of our state of mind and our state of health is derived from our mental state, and if we can address that in a way that is constructive, then we can obviously make great progress. It is a lot of mind over matter in that regard. Now, when you're doing are you taking pulses as a acupuncturist might in order to determine where the meridians might be weakest or weaker?
Well, no, I'm not an acupuncturist,
Hmm.
so I've become, as a layperson, I can talk the talk, and even more than that, I mean, I understand a lot of the theory.
Right.
But I use a lot of different diagnostic tools. Again, I use astrological models that I've come up with to examine potential imbalances in the meridian system. And I'll mention, because again, many people may not be aware of this, but the great cosmobiologist Reinhold Ebertin,
Right.
in the preface to his book The Combination of Stellar Influences, actually posits a very interesting direct connection between the meridians of Oriental medicine and the 12 houses of the horoscope.
Interesting.
So this is a model of the horoscope that I often use. I've also devised my own 8 extraordinary meridian model of the horoscope, which I use for diagnostic purposes, so that, let's say hypothetically, someone comes in who has a great concentration of planets in a certain quadrant of the
Hmm.
horoscope. In the paradigm that I've established for myself, I would then associate that with a potential disharmony with that particular meridian and proceed accordingly. I also use pendulums, muscle testing, these types of things.
Right, right, right. So if you see a stellium in a person's chart, do you regard that as an area of focus that is potentially weaker, or do you see that as an area where there might be more of a concentration and therefore stronger?
Yeah, I would probably fundamentally see it not necessarily as a weakness, but as something that could potentially be disharmonious.
I see.
In the
Yeah,
way.
uh-huh. And therefore it would be wise to address it in a proactive preventative measure, simply to try to bolster that area up. We're all a composite of a multitude of different aspects, as you well know, and planets and influences, and to be able to see those areas in your life and then to sort of approach them in a gentle way, sort of like, repairing a boat. If you see a piece of wood that's beginning to leak, you want to repair these things before you have a leaking boat. You have to sort of if you're proactive, if your house is beginning to rot and you start seeing termites, you react that way by allowing that to be, remove the termites. And so,
Yeah,
preventative medicine is a very wise and very common in Eastern philosophy and culture, and it's
yeah,
just now coming to us. But I think the idea holds a lot of water.
yeah,
I personally go to acupuncturists once a week, always have for the last 8, 9, 10 years,
yeah.
just as a routine measure for what I would call just a general tune-up. I don't go for any ailment whatsoever. I've always
Exactly.
I've always approached it as a way of dealing with sort of a routine maintenance, and it's something we all have to do, just the way we would exercise or anything else like that. When you're using these, so the tuning forks today, you actually the way that they are they used through a methodology of actually placing them on the body in order to get
Yeah,
the resin? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought, as opposed to just listening to them.
yeah. Well, look, vibration is vibration.
Hmm.
Our body perceives vibration. The fundamental organ of reception is the ears. This is where sound impacts us. So,
Right.
I mean, I would say to you that even in the perception of these frequencies, informed by the intention of the practitioner, the necessary process of harmonization has begun. But the body is fundamentally our shadow, and we
Hmm.
store our cellular programming within it. So by bringing then these frequencies directly to bear upon the body, particularly through meridians and points that have this explicit connection to what the Oriental medicine people would refer to as the Jing, our fundamental, again, I'll use our Western term, DNA level of organization. We're really going to the core of the issue. And as I said, but I would say to you, there are people that, for example, use the planetary gongs that are associated with the system to give people gong baths. You know?
Right. I guess what I'm confused by is how you come up with a combination of resonances of notes that would address a particular thing or address a certain area. So I'm gathering that you do a review of the astrological chart. You see where there's concentration, or you see where there may be squares or whatever that are dynamic to the individual, and you address them in sort of how do you concoct your approach, I guess is what I'm coming to. How do you determine which...
I refer to it as a vibrational prescription.
Okay.
So it is, in a sense, as you've already suggested, it is a synthesis of what seems to be most germane to the individual at the time of the consultation. I see. So in an initial consultation, then, it would be probably natal disharmonies that seem the most pressing. But also, you know, even in an initial consultation, we usually at least get to some consideration of transits. So
yeah, I think the transits would bear out. I mean, obviously the natal chart would have, you know, would show the key indicators of where potential problems might occur, but those potential problems may lie dormant for many years. It's only doing it during a transit that they may become activated.
Yeah, but again, looking at it from our Oriental perspective, those disharmonies, while they may be dormant, are nevertheless extant, and therefore they're germane to any point in time. Now, if they're exacerbated then by a current planetary transit, well, then the issue becomes all the more pressing. But so it's in a synthesis of those things. And admittedly, I would say to you that as a person who's not an acupuncturist, you know, I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of acupuncture points. So when I see someone, I usually focus my energy and my intention on the 8 extraordinary meridians, because it's simply 8 points that someone who isn't, you know, an acupuncturist can probably readily absorb with time. And then other key points that seem relevant. For example, there's a whole array of points on the front of the chest referred to as the kidney spirit points, which address fundamental psychospiritual issues. So someone who isn't an acupuncturist can, you know, take within their purview 25, 30 acupuncture points and use them very effectively in these treatments with these forks, and address not only considerations of natal disharmony, but also the effects of ongoing transits.
Right. Interesting, very interesting. So you're basically applying the acutonic sort of vibrational therapy to the acupuncture points so that they resonate the same way they would if you were to go in for acupuncture. I mean, they have the same effect, or the same area of the body would be affected by the approach of the tuning forks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is that because we're talking about a repertoire of planetary frequency, plus the considerations that are involved in blending the tones that create musical intervals, you have multiple levels of what I refer to as archetypal significance that can then be there.
Yeah, it can become quite complicated. I can see that immediately.
Also, where it becomes quite extraordinarily,
absolutely
impactful in its implications.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating, really, and we're going to be talking more about this. We're talking today with Michelangelo, not the Italian sculptor or artist, but a practitioner, an astrologer, and opera singer as well, among many things, who practices a unique form of planetary vibrational medicine. His name is Michelangelo. His website is michelangelo-medicalastrology.us, and it's Michelangelo. The Michael in Michelangelo does not have an A in it, so it's MichelAngelo-medicalastrology.us. We're talking today about planetary vibrational medicine and how we can use the harmonics of the individual planets and the types of resonances that they give out to treat ourselves to a sound bath, which then offers us a preventative medicine approach to keeping ourselves healthy. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. I encourage you to look at Michelangelo's website and see what you can determine from there, and we will return and continue our discussion. So hang in there. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color. Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is Michelangelo. He's not the Italian sculptor or artist, but he is a planetary vibrational medicine practitioner, and he uses sound, especially with tuning forks, as a treatment for perhaps human ailments, or perhaps in a way to align ourselves more accurately with our astrological self. Now, the reason this works, I believe, as our first discussion was circling around, was the idea of we're all composed of vibrations. We are a living vibrational entity in ourselves, as is the whole entire universe. There's this mathematical sort of frequency that's out there for each planet, and this has been documented, well documented over the centuries. Matter of fact, there's been pieces have been written. Holst wrote a very famous symphony on the planets, each of which represents sort of the vibration of the planet. And in this case, each planet is assigned a frequency. And when those frequencies are applied to the body in the form of acupuncture, there's great work that comes out of it. And this is what we're talking about today. So, Michelangelo, when you look at this from a standpoint of trying to sort of, and what is the word? It's the oneiromancy?
Oneiromancy.
Yeah. That's
dream interpretation.
Mm-hmm. Now, through dream interpretation, would you be able to determine where a person might be struggling and how sound might best help them?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I can't lay claim to having come up with this potential application for astrological.
Right. No, that's okay. Yeah.
There's a couple of wonderful people out there. Linda Reed, a psychological astrologer from Tasmania, wrote a great book called The Astrology of Dreaming about 20 years ago, which really was very impactful for me because I was very much involved in Jungian analysis.
Right, and they are directly related, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But great story in dreams. So the idea then of erecting a chart for the moment of a dream, which admittedly is often hard to pin down.
Right, yeah, I can see that for sure.
Has always struck me as being wonderfully resonant and powerful. And I'll give you an example. My partner, Mary Elizabeth Wakefield, had a very interesting dream not so long ago that involved black bile. And as a medical astrologer, my ears immediately perked up because black bile, of course, is one of the fundamental humors of of Western medicine that were originally posited by Hippocrates, and it refers specifically to the melancholic humor, but ultimately also to the planet Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to the best of my ability, I erected a chart for the moment of her dream and then subjected it to an extremely detailed analysis, which was very rewarding, and produced a wonderful article, which I'm going to publish at some point. But the moment of the dream was replete with astrological and personal significance. So given that it had so much impact from a psychospiritual perspective, logically then it would be comparatively easy to extend that then to actually applying planetary frequencies that would be particularly resonant with that moment of time.
Yeah. One of the problems many people have is remembering dreams. They may have them, they don't always remember them when they wake up, which is frequently my problem. So I'm frustrated by that constantly and trying to understand them. Occasionally I do remember them, and if they're profound, I write them down and to see what they have to hold forth. But I'm wondering, do you see a correlation between people's sort of disharmony or the need for acutonics and specific transits? In other words, if Saturn's going across your ascendant, or would you then feel more in that regard? Would you find would you be drained in some area that needed to be bolstered via Saturn?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I mean, again, if we look at Saturn from a medical perspective, in the West it refers to a variety of different things: the gallbladder, the skin, all the our potential allergic reactions that involve the skin. From the Oriental medicine perspective, Saturn relates specifically to the earth element and to digestion. So it would not be far-fetched to assume that if someone is having a challenging Saturn transit, particularly, say, to the ascendant, first of all, that they might be depressed, they might become melancholic, but they could also then potentially have digestive issues.
Right. Interesting. And I guess you would see that with all the other planets as well, especially if someone's having a strong Pluto transit or anything like that. You would also find that to be the case. And even though Jupiter is considered to be a benefic, it could actually have amplifying qualities to it that could also be sort of just the opposite as well, correct?
Oh, no, Jupiter can function. Both Venus and Jupiter can function in a very deleterious fashion from a medical perspective, because too much of something that's not good for you is not good for you.
That's right, exactly.
If you bring Jupiter to bear, well, then it becomes excessive and potentially and of course Cancer in and of itself is a Jupiterian idea, the idea of unchecked growth. So
right.
Combining it
exactly.
with something.
Exactly. Now, when you are using the tuning forks, you sort of have to you have to come up with some sort of a prescription, and I'm curious as to your process as to how you come up with sort of a sound bath or a sound prescription.
Yeah. Well, again, what I would say to you is that I would apply principally the 8 extraordinary model of the chart that I've come up with. So I would look at that and say, okay, well, this person has a number of an intense concentration on, again, I'll use the example I used before, the daimai, which can potentially refer to emotional toxicity,
mm-hmm.
things of that nature, the inability to make appropriate decisions, and again, it also relates to potentially to disharmonies with the sexual chakra, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So that I would say, well, that the vibrational signature for the daimai then is Mars Jupiter. So I would say, okay, well, we'll use Mars Jupiter, and we'll use it very specifically on the 2 points that are related to the daimai. So that's the first point.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we can flip it on its back, if you will, and say, okay, obviously Mars Jupiter relates to this potential disharmony, but we could also then regard it as something that could be brought to bear in a positive way, because
right.
the blending of Mars and Jupiter could be seen to relate to inspirational states, or possibly giving a person more energy, or any number of other things that might come to mind.
This is the great duality of astrology. For everything that there is that's bad, there's an equal side that's equally good, and depending upon how it comes out, you have a different outcome each time. But there is always that duality there, which is representative of the nature of life in itself. We live in a dualistic world, and we see these sort of parallels very strongly, especially with regard to the notes that you're using. I'm sort of fascinated by the combination of notes and how they appear, because when you have say you have two tuning forks, one, they are going to form a third a third sound as a result of ringing them at the same time. And is it the third sound that sort of addresses or applies the healing quality, or is it the individual sounds themselves?
Yeah, I would say to you that fundamentally we're talking about the individual planetary frequencies.
Okay.
But there is a synergistic aspect to that interval.
Yeah.
And I mean, the point you just made, and I think this is often very difficult for people to understand when they're dealing with archetypal symbolism, is that to a certain extent, much of what we do has to involve the embracing of paradox. Mm-hmm. A thing can mean one thing, and then it can mean the complete opposite. You know, the idea that archetypes present us with a potential wide spectrum of possible manifestations, from good to ill, and it becomes when I was doing tarot readings, when I first started doing this work many years ago, I talked about the idea of intuitive improvisation. Mm-hmm. Essentially, when you work with this type of information, when you work with symbolism, you're always, to a certain extent, embracing the paradox that's involved and using this symbolism in a context-specific way, so that from one session to the next, that same Mars-Jupiter combination could mean a myriad of different things. And that's, to me, one of the great virtues of it is its infinite malleability. Right. You know, Richard Tarnas in
Cosmos and Psyche, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talks about, you know, the multivalence of astrological symbolism, you know, and I think that's one of the truly remarkable things about being able to work with it is that it is malleable in this way, and that doesn't obviate the intention of what you're doing or the significance of what's being brought to bear. It just lies beyond our linear way of thinking at times.
Mm-hmm. So when someone comes to see you and wants to delve into this sort of therapy, why would you apply every note for every planet? Because we all have every planet in our charts.
Way too much. I mean, yeah. You know yourself, you can't possibly extract all the meaning from a person's chart in one session.
Of course not, right.
Find the things that seem most germane at the time, and you obviously you seek the client's feedback on that as well, and then you bring your understanding and your wisdom to bear, and provide them with strategies for coping with what they need to cope with. So it would be the same thing with a vibration treatment. Mm-hmm. You can only really, a consultation with me is usually 90 minutes of standard psychospiritual counseling, for want of a better term, and then a half hour to 45-minute vibrational treatment.
Interesting.
But it's in the synergy of the two that I think the great potential for transformation lies.
Mm-hmm. But you have to at some point make a distinction as to which harmonic to apply to an individual, yeah. And that comes through your talk and through the work, the astrology work that's presented for you.
In the same way that you would if, let's say, you're a practitioner who uses Bach flower remedies or whatever, right. Or someone you tell someone to wear red because their Mars is out of whack, and they need to come into harmony with their Mars. It's really much the same idea. We're talking about different types of vibrational chi, that can be brought to bear.
Yeah, and when we live in a world, of course, where we are so overly stimulated, I guess now that in many ways this would be a very soothing respite from what we are facing in that regard, and sort of a sound salve for the bombardment of what we receive in our daily lives through the form of vibration.
Yeah, that's a very savvy point you just made there. As a person who is fundamentally a sound person, I've spent most of my life dealing with sound. Mm-hmm. First as an opera singer, and latterly as a composer and a sound healer, and I see a fundamental malaise in our culture that has to do with the fact that we're losing our capacity to be receptive, and this is one of the fundamental tenets, I think, of the sound healing movement, if you will, is that it allows people to reconnect with that way of being that is slowly but surely, by the very nature of our high-speed lives and our constant interaction with visual technology, we're losing our capacity to simply be present and listen to somebody else.
Right. And the problem, I think, the overarching problem is that much of this is being pushed at us as opposed to our electing to receive it. We are bombarded whether we want to be bombarded or not. We can't just unsee something. We can't unhear something. Once it's heard, once it's seen, it's there. It's sort of like being recorded on our hard drives. And so because so much of this stuff is being pushed at us, a nice way to maybe soften that blow would be to go the opposite direction and do the sound healing. This seems like it's a natural sort of, antidote to the bombardment that we receive on our daily lives.
Yeah. So the capacity for the individual to be still and to be purely receptive is, again, can be wonderfully transformative. We are so relentlessly young now in our culture. We're losing our capacity to be in, and of course, concomitant with that is the fact that our planet is heating up. Our planet is becoming more and more relentlessly young. You know, the last 6 years have been the 6 hottest years on record here worldwide, and we're losing yin at a remarkable rate. And so, sound is one of the ways in which we can be yin. You know, our ears are a fundamental organ that is all about reception. So and of course, again, the whole body is essentially capable of receiving.
Right. I mean, do you think that there is a pendulum swing in all of this? I mean, that one runs from if we're running too yang, do we then hit a wall and come back and pick up the yin on the way back?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I'd be qualified to.
Well, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I mean, I see that sort of happening. We sort of go through these cycles where, and it's very indicative through history, and all backed up by astrology. We go one direction for a while, and then we hit a wall of some sort, and then we sort of work our way back, and it's in that constant, positive, negative, negative, positive interchange that we try to find and strive for equanimity.
Yeah. I mean, I would say to you, I think the only thing that would stop the runaway train of global warming at this point would be a collapse of, human contributions to it.
Well, something would have to yank our attention to that, and in a way that was overwhelmingly, undeniably factual, that seems to be lost on major people right now. But, that is sort of the sort of thing that I think could happen if we're not careful. And we may turn that corner where we can't recover, and then we have to go into a repair state, which is much different than being preventative, obviously. And that speaks to your same topic. How better is it to be preventative with regard to medicine than it is to have to be reactive all the time?
Yeah, exactly. And in parallel with that, I would say to you also that much of our yang nature now has to do with the what's the word I would use? The hegemony, if you will, of visual interaction with the world. We have become so relentlessly visual as a species. We spend all of our time interacting with little screens. I mean, I read a statistic not so long ago that says that the average American now spends 9 hours a day looking at screens.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody, but usually it's in conjunction with business. But it's making us more and more yang, and it's taking us away from essentially yin aspect of ourselves. So all of this work then with healing sound is a palliative for this excessively yang visual interaction that's being forced upon us by new technology.
Right. Yeah, I can see the
very
palliative.
happy, for example, that you and I are not talking visually because, first of all, the technology, as far as I'm concerned, isn't really horribly reliable yet, and being that we're in a Mercury retrograde period, we don't need to concern ourselves with the
Let's not push our luck. Exactly.
So, but the idea that we can talk to each other and listen, is for me very satisfying.
Yeah. I agree. And it gives us, the thing is, this is what we're missing. We don't have these conversations, I don't think, as a rule. I'm making a very blanket statement here, but people, as a rule, don't have conversations such as this. A lot of people are reducing themselves down to little snippets of text messages, and there's a whole element of the human experience that we're missing, and it's really a shame.
Yeah, well, when you have young people, for example, who are in the same room with each other, but who can't speak directly, but who must send text messages from one phone to another, something is wrong.
Yeah, no, I know. That's a real social problem. That is just
families communicate that way. There's something is desperately wrong.
Yeah, it is, and I wonder how the solution comes. But I'm interested in the idea of the sound therapy, because I think of it is it is an antidote to much of this. I think this is where
absolutely.
This is where the real value comes from, and I think that by becoming more now, could a person self heal themselves if they had tuning forks? Could they, or would they be out of their element doing that?
No, I mean, what I would say to you is that historically, when we used to go to acutonics seminars, everybody there was self-medicating. So no, yeah, you can definitely self-medicate to a point. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. No. It gets a little difficult. For example, usually when we do a treatment with these forks, we almost always ground the person first, and the point that's usually employed is on the soles of the feet, kidney 1. So that's a little difficult to reach by yourself. But again, just in simply listening to the frequency of Earth that's involved, you can essentially begin the whole process of grounding. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Right. And we're also removed by way of our connection with the Earth as well. I mean, how many people actually put their feet into grass on an average day and walk around the planet that way instead of being on concrete or some other artificial thing? There is something coming out of the Earth that we probably don't always know about, and it's something that we're missing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're probably aware, Chris, that they've done studies now that show that human beings respond in a very positive way to contact with nature, and most of us don't get it anymore. And Earth connection is also about yin, right? Because
yes,
fundamentally yin. So we don't have it. We're constantly at a remove from
right. And so being pulled into a yan type of a world or structure right now, the best thing to do would be to try to apply as much yin as possible to sort of bring yourself into balance. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, yeah, absolutely.
Now, how do you do this to yourself? Do you have a ritual where you approach this, or do you do this to yourself in a way that you find to be therapeutic, or is it just as a standard sort of meditative practice or a healing tool for yourself?
I would say that the old truism is true. Physician, heal thyself. I'm probably a little remiss in that regard. I do maintain my own constitutional balance with Chinese herbs.
Yeah.
But the thing I wanted to mention in conjunction with that, which is something that I do on a regular basis, is use gem elixirs. And I don't know how much of your audience would be familiar with this idea, but gem elixirs are distillations of the crystalline essence of stones, and and you probably are aware that are all of the precious stones that we know, of course, correspond to various colors, and each of the colors have very specific frequencies according to our understanding of color as a reflection of light frequency. So by extension then, and esoterically, almost all stones that we are associated with or that we can bring to bear also have planetary components. So you can then, or planetary implications, if you will, so that you can then select a particular stone. Let's use diamond, for example. Well, diamond is considered to relate to Venus. It could also be considered to relate to the sun, but often considered to relate to Venus, particularly from a Chinese 5-element perspective, where it would be considered metal element. So if you put a diamond in pure water and you put it out under the rays of the sun or the moon for a period of a week or more, the water absorbs the crystalline essence of the diamond. You can't see it, but you could view it with Kirlian photography. So as such, then the water becomes imbued with all of the archetypal significance of diamond as a reflection of its own mineral essence, but also the esoteric implications, and again particularly with Venus, so that you could then use this diamond elixir to address Venusian imbalances, people who have relationship problems, people who are creatively frustrated, and again from a Chinese 5-element perspective, metal element imbalances such as respiratory difficulties or issues with self-esteem, all of these types of things. So I have often have recourse to using gem elixirs for myself. And that's another way that planetary essence can be brought to bear.
Yeah, interesting. It must be. It must have been a fascinating discovery for you as a professional musician to come to this point where you find this sort of melding of ideas and philosophies and practice to a place where it has actual physical benefits to you. I mean,
I feel a very unique synthesis, synergy of ideas, and ultimately, I would say to you that clearly this was where I was headed in my own personal trajectory. Was that both my partner Mary Elizabeth and I had, more than an amount of success as international performers in the opera world, but clearly our destiny was something else. Our destiny was to bring these different things to bear in a unique sort of way, and I mean, I would say to you that as someone who taught music theory and did these things, that when I began to engage with these tuning forks and the frequencies, I realized that I had to sort of completely rewire my ideas about tone.
And interesting. Yeah, right. Wow. I could see that because you've probably learned a certain set of rules or traditions, and this is a much different, much larger sort of embrace of the value of sound and frequency.
Yeah, I mean, the frequencies that are involved in this system bear only a tangential relationship to what we would refer to as the Western chromatic scale. Mm-hmm. So, in working with them, in attempting to interpret them for people who aren't musicians or who maybe not as conversant with music theory, I've had to sort of, as I said, expand my whole awareness about the implications of vibratory chi.
Right. But we're all human, and we all operate at our own frequency. We all have our own set of parameters with which we work and try to move ourselves forward. And so the idea that introducing this universal concept of sound as an antidote, I think, is very good. And I think the way this probably works the best is in a preventative measure, whereby we sort of step into it before things begin to fall down. That's not to say that they can't be made better if you are already in a bad spot. You can perhaps reverse some of that, I suppose. But I suspect
absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, this is the traditional medicine paradigm that someone comes to you who isn't ready to be hospitalized,
right?
But something's wrong, right? They don't feel well. Their digestion's off. They've got too much heat in their head. They're having trouble sleeping. Okay, these are all things that are not life-threatening, but they are obviously perturbing to the harmony of their days.
Right.
You can obviously, right, whether you're using herbs or whether you're using things of this nature, you can reharmonize them in such a way that they go back to a condition of homeostasis.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of like it's like burning a new circuit. You have a circuit that's damaged, and on a circuit board, you have to sort of rewire it. This is a way of sort of rewiring something in your body that gets you back into a more harmonious and balanced state, it seems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
And as any form of therapeutic consultation, this is something that people could do on a frequent basis and receive benefit from.
Yeah, I could see it, absolutely. And it's worked with a practitioner rather than trying to self-medicate, so to speak, right? I mean, it's kind of...
Well, I mean, sure, but it's because of the intermeshing of so many different things.
Yeah, exactly.
Difficult.
Yeah, it is.
Wasn't conversant. For example, when I first became involved with the Acutonics community, they really didn't have anybody in their network that had both musical understanding and astrological awareness.
Right. It's where those two coincide that's where the true value comes from, because you got a pairing of interesting modalities that work well together. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I've heard this system before, and I've always been intrigued by it. I think it has great value. Especially given the current climate we're in a very fractious time in the world, and I think that the ability to be able to work with these tools, it can be incredibly effective, and I think could actually nip it in the bud. Like you say, many times just applying this at the right time. And I think many of us know that things are out of sorts, or we're going down the wrong way, or we have bad habits, and this is a way of sort of, addressing that and being mature about it and applying the therapy in a preventative manner that allows us to achieve balance. That's fascinating. Well, listen, my guest today has been Michelangelo. He is not the Michelangelo sculptor or Italian painter, but he is a planetary vibrational medicine practitioner, and his website is michelangelo-medicalastrology.us. It's Michelangelo, MichelAngelo-medicalastrology.us. I encourage you to go there and learn what you can about this interesting process, and hopefully catch him on the road somewhere. You're going to be traveling, and you frequently do workshops and stuff like that, Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to be teaching the first module of my own training course in Sedona in a couple of weeks. I've just been actually invited to present at a big conference in India.
Oh, that's great. Wow, very good.
Early next February.
That's great. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you. I encourage people to seek out your work and to see what's going on. And it's been great having this conversation with you, and I thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed talking to you. And if I can just get on the soapbox just for 1 second.
Sure.
To my fellow astrologers out there, don't be afraid to come to the dark side. Embrace transformational planetary body work.
Okay, very good. And you can use that to augment your own practice and deepen your knowledge of astrology.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Thanks so much for your interest and your obviously wonderfully intelligent questions.
Well, great. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you having the conversation, too. So, very good. Thank you so much. Take care.
Yep. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.